All right. Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to another Learning Tech Talks, where we are continually exploring the landscape of learning tech while cutting through the fluff. Today, I am rejoined by Mikael Wornoo, and we were just talking about the cool 2 dots he has in his name. So I'm trying to make sure I pronounced it right, which he confirmed that I did. So he's back. He is back on the show, and we're going to be talking about a lot of things related to skills and digging into skill taxonomies, skill inference, real practical use cases on how are people using skills. And it was a year ago, we talked about this right before we went live. It's been a year since you've been here, and a lot has happened since then. Is that fair to say?
A lot has happened. So I hope I can share everything that happened, but good to be back, Chris.
Everything. We're going to get through everything. A year's worth of updates. Literally everything. We're going to be here till 4 a.m.
Yes, exactly.
Something
it's
like
5 p.m. Now in Europe and Belgium, where I'm from. So people listening back home are probably like using this to get ready for the weekend. I can imagine.
That's right. Well, what better way to get ready for the weekend than to define skill taxonomies and prepare for what you can do with skill data? I like it. I like it. No, we're going to have a good conversation. And, you know, it's funny that a lot's happened in that year. We were even just talking about the fact that a year ago, we probably were talking about, won't it be nice that in a year we'll be done with COVID? And here we are. So, but it's all good. All good. So we're going to get into that. But while we're getting ready to dive into the conversation, we were talking about this as well. So this is going to be an interesting question. And those of you watching or listening, be sure to add in your responses in the comments. But you're working from anywhere. So, Mikael, where are you working from today?
I'm working from anywhere. And more specifically, I'm in Gran Canaria. So it's an island next to the coast of Africa. It's really nice weather here. And I would recommend everybody to work from anywhere, specifically here. So
okay. Yeah. So if you're going to work from anywhere, work from there, because the weather is beautiful. You said back home it's gray and kind of the weather's crummy. So it's been a nice break.
Yeah, exactly. The weather is actually depressing, and just getting some sunlight here, it's been amazing.
Okay. All right. And you've been there for a week. You're going back home tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yeah, going back home tomorrow quite early. So it's going to be an early night for me as well. And then tomorrow it's
so we'll wrap this Learning Tech Talks at 3 a.m. You'll get a couple hours of sleep, just get back on a plane and then go. That's the plan.
Perfect.
All right. Well, I'm where I always am in Milwaukee. I don't have a cool story related to that one. But let's shift gears, because you said I was going to like your answer to our icebreaker question. So I'm really interested to see where it goes with this. So what is your interesting job that was completely unrelated to what you do today?
Yeah, and it is really unrelated. So I used to be a lifeguard at the coast in Belgium. Yeah, I even saved people. So it is maybe a little bit related, because I'm still saving people, of course.
Still doing that. So that skill is transferable. But okay. And where were you a lifeguard though? Like just like a community pool at like a cool water park? I mean,
what's at the beach actually? It was a beach
at the beach
for surfing. Yeah. So they were like, "You're tall. You can be where the surfers are at. You can save them." Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
That was
fun.
Right. It was fun though. This were long days, and sometimes it was quite gruesome, especially because at the regular beaches, people don't come when it's storming or the weather is bad. It's the other way around when or with surfers. Like if you have a lot of wind, they're coming out. If it's raining, they're definitely coming out for some reason. So it was quite the thing. So I did that over summer.
So it's not the glory days like a lot of people imagine, where every day is beautiful and you're just sitting, soaking in the rays, hanging out on your chair reading a book.
It wasn't Baywatch. It's not at all, actually.
Okay. Interesting. And so random related question to that one then is, are you into swim? Like, were you a really good swimmer? Like, I mean, because obviously if you're saving people in rough, I mean, this isn't the community pool where you're not dealing with anything other than just obnoxious kids. So are you a pretty solid swimmer then, or were you at the time?
I used to be, but the trainings were they were not fun. They were really early every time. So I kind of lost my love for swimming while becoming a lifeguard. And then when I was there, it was just the mandatory trainings I did, and I kind of stopped swimming especially
Okay.
especially when I got into units. Yeah, I lost my love for swimming. Maybe it was there at some point, but right now it's like a few hundred meters and that's it. So no.
Okay. And I'm assuming your trainings weren't e-learning modules either.
No, sadly not. It was swimming with clothes on, and
Okay.
then swimming with terrible or in terrible weather conditions. A lot of running, and running in sand is terrible, and they really liked to let you run in sand
Running
for
in
some reason.
sand is awful. Yeah, running in sand.
Yes.
It's hard on your feet too. Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense. And the lesson for everybody learning is you can actually train people to hate something that they once loved. We can now take that from that.
Exactly.
L&D people, warning, if we overtrain people or push them too hard, something they dearly love, they may say, you know what, I just can't handle this anymore. I quit.
Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth?
Okay.
That's it's true.
Okay. All right. Well, mine is I actually had a community conversation on this in the community this week. So I used to build golf courses. I worked on a construction crew and I traveled around the US and built golf courses. So I used to drive the heavy equipment, carved out greens with bulldozers, all sorts of stuff. So I learned a ton from doing that. I don't apply much of it from my home office anymore, but if I ever get a piece of equipment, maybe I'll do something fun. I can still run a skid steer, that kind of stuff. So nothing that exciting, but it was super fun. Got to know tons of people. Not something everybody's done is saying built golf courses. So
definitely not. But so not a lot of transferable skills on your end then.
That was one of the follow-up questions though. When I had this discussion was what was something you learned from it? And the thing with it is, in construction, the crews it's a really diverse group of people. You come together quick and you're from all different backgrounds and you had to learn how to get to know people really quickly, especially people that maybe on the surface you'd be like, we don't really have anything in common. And actually that was really helpful. I learned a couple languages, got to know folks. So I still do use that, but not much of my heavy equipment or how to carve the fairway of a PGA course. I don't use that really anymore. Anyway, okay, go for it.
Yeah, what I learned when I was lifeguard was how easy it is to just not be attentive. You have to pay attention the entire time. And it was, especially in the beginning, you're distracted all the time. And you have to essentially keep your eyes on the water. You have to know, you know who's in the water. Essentially, you have to count them as well if you really want to be good at your job. So when you know, like, okay, people are coming in and out, or the number suddenly dropped by 2, that should ring a bell and say, maybe I should go and take a look. But in the beginning, it was so hard to be attentive all the time. So it was some good training, and also just on a meta level, you learned a lot about your own perception and how easy it was to be distracted. So. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and you know what's funny about that, and I know we'll shift gears because otherwise we'll be here till 4 a.m. But it is the fact I've had a few friends who are lifeguards, and there is this impression that you're just sitting, kind of reading a book or looking at but actually it's not. You have to be watching everything that's going on, because the other thing, you tell me if this is true or not, but I remember one friend said people who are drowning, it's not like in the movies where there's this big splashing and their arms are flying around and you're like, oh, that person's drowning. I mean, they're like, it's actually this quiet, all of a sudden you notice somebody just isn't moving or whatever, and you have to be really attentive to it.
Exactly. It's exactly like that. And that's why I mentioned counting. So you count the people that are in the water, because that's essentially the only way to know if someone has been under for a while. And then when you notice that, you go in the water, or at least you call the people on the boat, and then they go have a look. But that's the problem. It's like you don't see when somebody is drowning; they just start sinking, and that's really tricky, especially in the beginning.
Okay, all right. And I don't know that an AI skills taxonomy will help with that one though. I don't think so. Maybe we'll find out. We'll see if that's one of the use cases that comes up in the conversation. Stay tuned, everybody. Okay, but let's do a quick overview for folks, because we did go live a year ago and you were much earlier stage than you are now and have made some huge progress since then. But for folks who may be thinking TechWolf, we're talking skills. What is it? What is kind of your elevator pitch of what is it that TechWolf does?
Yeah, great. So first, let me introduce myself for people who don't know me. I'm Michael. I
That's
have a
true.
background in computer science and AI. The three founders of TechWolf did or do. We started the company with the three of us, and we grow from 3 to 25 people over the last 3 years. So quite some tremendous growth. Signed some big names over the last few years. And essentially what we're seeing is that many organizations are making the shift from job titles to skills, because a job title isn't the correct level of analysis to do talent management. A software engineer is called a software engineer at TechWolf, but also at an automotive parts company. So it doesn't really tell you what someone is doing. So
no, it doesn't.
Exactly. We see organizations shifting from job title to skills because it's a better way to understand people and their capabilities, one job title or 25 skills. And it's also a better way to understand change. And Gartner saw that the skills for the same job title or for the same job description are changing by 25% year over year. So essentially in 5 years, you have 20% left. So it's not the same job. So really that skills piece and that skill-based organization is becoming ever more relevant. But people are really bad at self-assessing their skills. Everybody thinks they're a better driver than average. You even have prisoners that rate themselves higher in kindness and morality than people that aren't incarcerated. So manual input really doesn't work. We had customers where they had an entire skills management program. Only 20% of people regularly updated their skills. So that's broken. People can do it, they don't update it. And that's why we built artificial intelligence to look at different data sources, HR data sources, so think career history, learning history, non-HR data sources like the projects you work on, and translate that to skills and use that skills data to solve some of the use cases we'll get into. So that's the kind of long elevator pitch.
Well, no, and I think this will set the table for some of this stuff that we're about to talk about, because it is important. I've had a few people ask, what's the conversation topic this week? And I've described it similar to what you've said, because this is a really important conversation that's coming up. I mean, every report I see in the trends, every HR trends and report that comes out is talking about this shift you referenced, which is this movement from job titles to skills, because it is really important. And some of that's not new, in the sense, the example you used, a software engineer at Ford Motor Company versus Microsoft are two very different skill sets. And I think there's always been this understanding that, we recognize there's that difference, but we didn't really know what to do about it. And so we'd write different job descriptions and things like that. But it made it very hard even for the candidate to know that piece. And then the self-assessment's another complexity, which we'll dig into more there. But I think what you're talking about, I commented on a post this week about it, is being able to actually get that information is not easy for folks. And I continue to see in conversations that I have that that's probably one of people's biggest things. They're trying to pull it maybe from Workday. I had one company I was talking to that they set up a skills portal, like you talked about. Everybody go fill out your self-assessment. It did not work very well because, one, you couldn't get people to do it. Two, it just didn't stay current. And three, that cognitive dissonance of, I'm really great at this. And it's like, I don't think you're actually very great at that, but you clearly think. I mean, there's a lot of challenges with that. And you're pulling that together from a multitude of data sources.
Exactly. And it's not just the HR sources. It gives you some context. But essentially, the systems where you apply and demonstrate skills are not HR systems. For sales, it might be Zoom and Salesforce. For marketing, it's project management tools. It's Teams. For developers, it's Git, it's Jira, it's Slack. So it's really combining those. I don't know if you ever saw a 3D movie. You have like the two glasses. You have the red glass and blue glass. You need both lenses. So let's say the baseline core HR data, the data from your employee record, it sets the context. What's your education? What's your history? And what you work on, instantiates that context, gives you additional, more granular information. And you need the two pieces of the puzzle to actually understand what people are capable of. And then that's when you really unlock the value of a skill-based organization.
Okay. Well, and the point about, I think that's a huge takeaway for folks who may be, digging into this space. Cause I would say on the, not maturity in terms of mature, but more on the maturity curve of where you are in the process. I think a lot of folks are still early stage in this. They recognize it's a gap. They recognize there's something they need to do about it. And they're figuring out, so what do we do about it? But that understanding that if you're trying to tackle this skills problem and all you're looking at is the data you have in HR, that is a miss. I mean, that is a big miss in terms of actually capturing that whole picture of the person, because the reality is our systems only, that is one lens, and one lens is not a complete lens when you're looking at something as complex as a person's skills.
Exactly. It's just that, and that's also what we see. It's by combining the two that you get the full picture. And then when you talk to people in the business, I've had so many people just tell me, like, I never update Workday. Almost like what they're almost proud of it. Like, I never opened that thing, or I never opened the code. It's true. And then
no, it is. And then you think about the fact that the half-life of skills is going like this, and then people go, I haven't been in Workday and updated that for 2 years, when most skills are basically obsolete in a few years. Well, then essentially what you're saying is anything we do have is probably either completely obsolete or it's at least grossly out of date.
Exactly. And people, like, they're bad at self-assessment, but they also, like, there isn't really an incentive to keep this up to date. And many organizations come to us, they say, like, look, we tried skill management, and the problem is we now have multiple platforms requiring our employees to complete skills data on one hand. On the other hand, they're saying we want a consumer grade employee experience. Like, those two do not match.
And then asking somebody to input all this information and self-assess 5 times in 5 different systems that don't talk to each other is that's not a consumer grade experience at all.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then when you think about it, like, having that information unlocks so much value. Like, our CEO always says, like, 80% of market cap is intangible value right now, and a large chunk of that intangible value is human capital. So right now that's accounted for as an expense, partly because it's really hard to have a comprehensive inventory of human capital, like to actually quantify human capital. And for us, that's what a skill inventory is, and that's also like the power skills unleash. And that's also what we see once our customers start looking at it like that. Like, they start talking about using skills for performance management, and using skills to objectify performance management, using skills to, and this is an interesting one for you, using skills to measure the ROI of learning, using skills to solve internal mobility, but not in a traditional sense. Because, let's say, if you implement the talent marketplace, it really takes you 18 months until that is set up and you actually drive internal mobility. But what if you have a problem right now? And as soon as you have inventory, all these problems can be solved by skills data, at least partly.
Yeah. Well, and as we get into some of these cases where, people may be saying, hey, we want to do something with this, but we're not exactly sure what, we'll unpack some of these. But one of the things I want to get to first is your definition on this one, because this is a term that's being thrown around a lot right now, which is skill taxonomy. And you see it in the vendor space. There's a lot of platforms that are saying we have our own skill taxonomy type of a thing. You hear people trying to map out their skill taxonomy, which is what's happening with this. Well, we're trying to gather this skill data so we can build our own skill taxonomy. And I will tell you, in conversations I have, people's understanding or their definition of what they mean when they're throwing this word around is not consistent. So being a specialist in this space and a tech company that specializes in, how do you define a skill taxonomy?
Exactly. And it's really not complicated, but for some reason, people have made it really...
We've made it really complicated.
So for me, for the company, and for a lot of people, a skill taxonomy is just a language to talk about skills. Essentially, it's like a dictionary of skills. And then a skill ontology, let's say, adds relationships to it. How does sales relate to marketing? How does marketing relate to advertising? So there's a few relationships that exist, hierarchies. Microsoft Azure is a subset of cloud computing skills or adjacencies, related programming languages. The problem is once you start once you try to manually maintain a skills taxonomy, it's like manually trying to maintain a Webster dictionary that is changing 25% year over year. So it doesn't work. And that's what we do. Is like, okay, you don't need a skill taxonomy to get started, because we create one for you from the data you have. We map skills for people, and then we create and cluster your taxonomy. And then manually trying to maintain it, I said it before, like, it's changing so rapidly that there's just no point. It takes a lot of manual work, and it decreases the leverage and the buy-in you have for a skills-based organization, because all people see is overhead.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that the simplicity of it actually makes it easier for folks. And I think to some degree it's been made more complex to kind of create some confusion. So it sounds really cool. Like, oh, you have a taxonomy. That sounds fancy type of a thing. But really, I mean, to me, the way I look at it is these skills are the things that people do. And the ontology you're talking about, it's like, well, how do we organize those? Because
Exactly.
and draw connections between them and say, well, these are related to these and these are kind of connected together. And it's really a lot more simple than we need it to be. And one of the things that I think you bring up that actually ties to a comment Katie made that is challenging is that a lot of the tech out there are creating their own taxonomies and all of this, which actually makes it hard because then it's hard to integrate these systems. And I think that was one of the interesting things the first time we met that I said you were doing a bit differently was you're not necessarily tied to any specific platform. You're literally saying, no, we come in and layer on top of that and say, what do you have? Let us pull that together and then actually look at, based on that, what taxonomy and ontology you have within your data.
Exactly. And Katie's remark is really valid because there's really no point in trying to have a monopoly on your taxonomy, because every customer we talk to, they want to have control over their skills. Like it makes sense. You want to have control over the skills let's say you reward in your organization, because it ties into so many things. So what we do is say, look, we'll do the heavy lifting of maintaining your taxonomy, but you have full control of how you want to maintain or update that taxonomy. We'll give you some updates. We see that people picked up new skills that are in the taxonomy. We can add it to them. I think that's one of the key differentiators and the key things we care about is giving the customers control over their taxonomy without just having to spend hours, days, weeks maintaining it. Because we see it with every vendor right now. They're monopolizing their taxonomy, and it's not necessarily helping. It's trying to create a competitive advantage, but it's a disadvantage for the user. And
to me, it's a short-term win for a long-term loss, both on the vendor and practitioner side. And it's a risk that I think organizations really need to consider carefully, because the reality is, if you get too bought into a single taxonomy that you don't own, that's too tied to a platform, it's dangerous territory, because now your whole taxonomy and ontology is tied to a specific platform versus this is what our skill ecosystem looks like. And I think that's a really important thing that you have to be able to manage. Now, on that topic, I am curious on this, and then I'm going to shift gears to something else, is with that whole component. All right. So we got these skill taxonomies, we've got all this stuff. Where do you stand on yes, there's nuance to your skills, but how do you balance that with, well, you can't get too honed in on your individual organizational skills because that may not translate to the market or understanding, what's going on. So how do you find that right balance in the spectrum so that you don't get over indexed on, well, we've built this so custom just for us that it actually doesn't translate to anything in the industry, while not going so broad based that it goes, well, now we're in the same situation where a software engineer at Ford is the same as a software engineer at Microsoft, and it's not really telling us anything meaningful.
Exactly. What we see with our customers is that you have between 80 and 90% overlap in skills taxonomies, and obviously you're going to have certain companies skills, but for some weird reason, people over-index on the company-specific skills, and they also think like, this is our taxonomy. It's not true. It's part of your taxonomy, but it's not the entire thing. And you also said something really interesting. It's like tying the platform to the taxonomy, and that really profoundly doesn't make sense to us. So that's why essentially we don't have a user interface. We are a backend interface. We solve the data problem. The skill data problem is a data problem, and as we discussed, people they don't complete their skills profiles. They don't update it. So it doesn't make sense to add a specific user interface for it. And it also doesn't make sense for a platform to own that taxonomy. So yeah.
Well, and I think it actually helps for folks out there who may be in this decision-making process for skills. Actually owning your taxonomy as its own separate thing actually makes the technology purchasing process easier, because you're able to say, this is our skill ecosystem. How does that translate into the tag? And as you're making your decisions, you can see, well, how well does this translate in, versus going the other way around and going, okay, what's the tech now? How would we make a skill ecosystem out of this? You're actually starting with the solution and working towards the problem, instead of starting with the problem and saying, okay, now we're working towards a solution.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then talking about problems, we see two types of organizations. Organizations that say, look, we know skills are important. We want to focus on skills management. And they come to us and say, like, okay, come in, do your API stuff, get a skills data, get it in our platform. That's the minority of the market. Where the other side of the market is at the moment is they're experiencing these problems. And what we see is that having skills data can actually solve those problems for them. So those are the two things we see in the market, and I would love to hear your thoughts on that as well. Like, what do you see happening in the market on maturity, let's say, with respect to skills?
Yeah. So in a lot of the conversations I've had, I would say probably more towards the latter, like you said, where people are not at the point where they're going, hey, we just need to wrap this up so that we can actually map this to where we need it to go in our systems, because they haven't quite cracked the skills code. They really don't know what they have, what they need, how that measures against what's going on in the industry. Do we have what we need? Are we ready to go where we need to go? And to your point, I think, and this is the interesting part about it, is a lot of people are trying to solve these problems thinking that solving the problems will get them to the skills taxonomy and ontology, versus it's the other way around. You go do this part, and a lot of these problems that are sitting in front of you, you go, well, now we have the information to solve them. We can easily solve this. We just need to figure out the how. But I would say that's almost, going back to folks who may be listening, that's almost a reversal of mindsets. I think a lot of people are trying to get their systems, their tech, their processes in order first so they can get their skills taxonomies in order. And to me, it's like, no, actually reverse your order. But I think the challenge is there's not a lot of places you can go do that, which is why even when we first started talking, I said, you're in a unique position, because not a lot of people are doing what you're doing, which is saying, we can help you do that so you can solve your tech problems, your people problems, your organizational problems. There's not a lot of players that are actually helping folks do that.
Exactly. And that's also what we've seen, like, especially in this year, you start noticing similarities with your customers. So what we do when we come in, we have like this onboarding package where we do a data maturity scan, look at which data sources are actually good predictors of skills data, and we help them set up their skill taxonomy. And those are the two things you need to start being a skills organization. And then typically in 6 to 8 weeks, we can give organizations, no matter the size, from the point we have the data, to an overview of individual skills. And people, they don't believe it, but
no, because a lot of people are like, oh, to do this is going to be a year-long project, and we're going to have to, do all this stuff. And it's like, actually, no, it's not.
Exactly. And then you get to the use case, because like getting the initial overview, the skills inventory, as we call it, that's point one. And then solving an actual problem with that, like the thing on performance management I mentioned, or let's say internal mobility. We had one customer that had to fire 3,000 people in their do nothing scenario. With our skills data, they could redeploy 200 people. That's 200 severance fees and 200 hiring fees that you save. That's a multi-million business case. And that's how people really start to realize, oh, wow, that's what we can do when we truly understand what our people are capable of.
Well, and that gets to this. And I think some of this is, there's an opportunity. I was reading the most recent Udemy report on skills in terms of what they're seeing in terms of market trends. And one of the interesting things that I continue to see growing, that I do think our industry might be lagging a bit behind. It's just behind, is a lot of other functions are focused on data acumen, just understanding data and what can be done with data. And I think we're lagging a little bit in this, which is why we're struggling to see what you can do with this skills data, and why getting this figured out and not the other way around. Again, the analogy that popped into my head is, sometimes I feel like we're like, I'll go get flour and eggs after I bake a cake. And you go,
exactly.
You don't bake a cake until you have flour and eggs. Like, you're doing this wrong. And I think that's the part that this skills acumen, the data acumen of understanding how you can do this, how these sources work, how you can pull this together, and then how that is the critical ingredients to the recipes that you're trying to solve for.
But also, and that's like after some reflection in the past months, like we came in with a very engineering AI mindset. But we also
Yeah.
have to talk your language. We also have to explain and educate people why this is a better way. Show them, give them examples like what you can actually solve with them, because it's something new. Especially if you have a typical background in psychology, you learn the things you learn, and
Yes.
like this wasn't possible until like very recently, and we're really at the cutting edge here. Like think about it, using teams data, using project management data to predict someone's skills. Like intuitively you maybe can guess it's possible. Like let's say I see whatever you're doing, whatever you're working on, it's easy for me
Yeah.
to guess your skills. But it's like a mindset shift. But once that mindset shift is made, like some really nice things happen. But it goes both ways. We also like worked a bit on our messaging. We made sure that we took our time to educate the market, to educate people on why this is a better way. But on the other hand, like data acumen, I think like 10 years from now, it will be a necessity.
It will help.
Maybe even sooner.
I think it will, but I think to that point of the messaging, and I will say that's a journey I've been on in my career, because my background's been very technical, and so going into L&D, there were a lot of things where I'd look at and go, I mean, isn't this really obvious? Like, isn't this really apparent to everyone? And it wasn't. And that storytelling of, okay, how do we translate this into HR language? How do we translate this into business cases for operations leaders? Because many of them don't have that kind of data acumen because they didn't need it before. And so when they're told, hey, if we build a skills taxonomy and ontology by pulling data from teams and other disparate technology sources, we can actually solve your business problems. Eyes go blank, flies over their head, and they're like, that I think we're good. Can't we send out a survey and just ask people what they're good at? And you're like, okay, hang on, let's but I think it's a fair amount to consider, but it is much easier than people think. And I think Katie chimed in again. It's not as crazy to do, but there is still a degree of work that goes into it. And I think even with some of the things you're saying, Katie, I think it's easier than we realize. Yes, there's work to be done, but I think what we're talking about here is the fact that a lot of this can be automated, and a lot of this can be done because a lot of that manual work and unwinding some of this stuff really can be done with tech. Is that fair? I mean, that's really where you specialize, is how do we actually use tech to accelerate and automate some of these things that are a lot of work, but they don't have to be a lot of work for us.
Exactly. It's exactly what we do. And to Katie's point, it's, again, people almost immediately associate manual work and a lot of manual work with this. But then we come in and show them, like, this is the amount of manual work you can actually save. You don't have to manually maintain your taxonomy. And of course, there's going to be some manual work. It's not going to be like this and you have skills
it's not like that.
But it's just a lot easier. And I think that's with many great technologies, they just make your life easier. And that's what we aim to do.
Okay. Well, and I think the point with that is, and to me, this is where I found success in this, is the work that I end up investing in when you make the right decisions on this is in the storytelling, is in the building influence, is in helping people understand what you're going to be able to do. It's that people side. And that's exactly what Katie chimed in on, is the fact that, yes, that people side is where the effort goes, helping people understand the value of this, helping understand what we're going to do with this. But it's not, I think sometimes when people think about skills taxonomies, they think of, oh gosh, we're going to have to run a survey and then analyze the survey results. We're going to have to pull all these inputs and do all that. And a lot of that is now completely automated.
And we have customers. I think David Sperl at GE Healthcare is one of the leading examples there. Like, they are at the beginning of their skills journey, and they know that, and that's perfectly fine. They know that it's, especially for a large organization, more than 50,000 people, they know that it isn't going to be solved in day one, but they're gradually building buy-in for the skill-based organization in the organization. We have the same with a global energy company. We started with skill-based workforce planning. Essentially, they're making a big transition from typically oil and energy to renewables. The workforce planning question is, how do we make this transition without firing 20,000 people and hiring 20,000 more? Then after showing the first results, we had a call with 6 VPs, all super interested in the skills piece, because we could actually show like, look, this is what we did. This is how much time it took us. And this is where this impacts all your respective areas. So
yeah. Well, and I think on that end, I think what we don't realize is we are capturing a lot more, especially with all the digital tech that now we have in organizations. We're actually capturing a lot more information than we may even realize. And so while we may think, oh, well, we'll get there once we figure this out, you probably have more than you realize to be able to at least pull some of this. So that transitions me to this piece, which is, okay, it's one thing, and I think this is another mindset shift, or not even necessarily shift, but maturity shift that we can make is, right now, I just see as an industry, we tend to put a lot of emphasis on getting the skill data right, or the skill taxonomy right. And that's a foundation, but that's not the destination. The destination isn't to go, hey, great, look at this. We have this really cool skills taxonomy now. And look how we've connected everything, and we've changed our job descriptions to match. This is wonderful. It's really about saying, well, what actionable inferences can we take, and what actions can we take off of this? So I'm curious, one, are you seeing, because you're talking to a lot of people about this, are they making that shift? Does that come pretty naturally once they see this come together and they go, whoa, do the wheels just start turning, or is there almost some effort that has to be done? And do people have to have some use cases coming into it, or does the data naturally just create them?
On your first question, like, you need to be a skill-based organization, and it doesn't have to be like a skill-based corner in the organization. Well, it's like we had one customer, and he was an early believer. He really was the number one cheerleader of TechWolf in his organization and outside of it. But the organization, they weren't ready to make that shift. They are now, but it really took them a while. On the use cases question, and maybe just to add to my previous point, so there's going to be some change.
Well, before you go to that, I want to ask on that one. Okay, so this organization, because I agree with you, and I think this ties to Katie's point of the people side. It's not even just the people, the end users. It's getting the organization and leadership to think of themselves as a skill-based organization. Have there been any things that you've seen that have helped people make that shift and go, oh, okay, now I get it? Or is it a timing thing? Is it we've just hit the floor, and then we fell through the floor and hit another floor underneath it, and we realized, like, uh-oh, the only way we're crawling out of this? I mean, what is it that actually forces that shift?
What really helps for us is just time to results. Like, look, we come in, we get you skills data, and we solve that use case or that problem. We had one customer, like I think a little under 10,000 people, and at some point we had the CEO, the CTO, and the CIO all in a meeting arguing about skills, and it was amazing to just sit back and relax, and suddenly it just clicked. Like, they were thinking in skills, and that's we essentially in that meeting we created buy-in at the top for the skill-based organization, because you solve the problem for the CEO. Well, if you solve a problem for the CEO, it typically is a little bit easier to.
It doesn't take very long. It doesn't take very long for things to pick up if you solve a problem at that level.
Exactly. And then on the use cases coming in, like, we used to be even a little bit cocky. It's like, yeah, just pick a use case, just pick a use case and get started with this. Like a few years into this, we noticed that just showing people, like, these are a few use cases in, let's say, talent, these are a few use cases in learning, these are a few use cases in workforce strategy that we see. Here's the menu. This typically works in your industry for your company size. It works a lot better because also, like, why is Amazon so amazing? They make it really easy for you to get started with them, to buy things. Like, sometimes we made it really complex for organizations to get started with us. So there might be some use cases ready, but there you have to differentiate between solving a problem for an individual and solving a problem for the organization. And especially with skills, it gets tricky. So that's what we do now. We have a bunch of use cases. We typically see, like, in a specific industry, it's going to be either, especially today, transformation, reskilling, upskilling related. In organization with high turnover, it's going to be focused on retention, making sure the organization is the best place to work, to grow and to develop. and to drive internal mobility, essentially, especially now with the Great Resignation or in workforce strategy. So typically, it's like a little bit of a positive reinforcement loop once we start talking, but we come in and just show them like this is what we can do with skills, and then we pick one that will have the biggest impact.
Okay. What's interesting about this is on this topic, because to me this is one of those. There's a handful of things over my career when I've gone. Believe me, you make a bet on this, you're not going to lose the bet. There's not a lot of things that I would just place my chips on and go, trust me, you make this bet, you're going to double your money and you're going to be able to reinvest. It's not really a question of whether you will. It's a matter of what the dividend on your return is going to be. This happens to be one of them, because even a recent industry report I was looking at, I think it's less than half of companies globally that were surveyed have any confidence in what they know about the skills of their workforce. Yet it is almost their number one priority in terms of this is a problem. So there's not a lot of organizations out there left that are going, this skills thing's a trend. We don't need to worry about it. And we've already got it figured out. I really can say, I don't think I've run across a single organization in the last 5 years that has said, nah, we're good. We're good. I'm not worried about it. There's not a senior executive in this company that has any concerns because we've solved it. But I think sometimes it's telling that story and not even telling the story. I think sometimes we can talk too much, because I had one conversation where I was talking to a board about this and I just asked that question. I said, how much do you know about the skills of your workforce? And you could just see some people tried to posture and pretend like, oh no, we know what's going on here. But just asking some simple questions. Yeah. No, I know my people. Exactly. Like, I know my people and I know what they need to do. But you ask the question, like, how are you doing that now? And the walls kind of come down. And how confident in that are you? Like, would you be willing to make a hiring decision, or would you be able to be willing to make a restructure with full confidence on the data you have? Any sort of posturing melts really quickly. And when you can get to that point, being able to say, but we can do something about that, that is a really compelling story that can change the mindsets. Because I would say, even if they're not using the right terminology, I would say most orgs recognize skills is a thing that's a problem for us, which is why it's showing up on not just HR reports. I mean, it's showing up on every industry report that's out there, that there's a skill crisis. We aren't sure what to do about it, and we don't have visibility into it.
Exactly. And Deloitte has these 2 really nice articles on the skill-based organization. And one of the key things they start with is really just saying, like, today, the talent shortage is one of the key things that's hindering business growth. So anything you can do to make sure that your people stay, and that's making sure that they are engaged, making sure that they can grow, that they can develop themselves, like that, the business case is there. People that are engaged in the work, people that can work on their strengths, they're twice as productive. So they are a lot more likely to stay. Same with growing people and developing people. So just from an individual perspective, knowing the skills of your people, as a manager, it helps you to assign them to projects that fit their strengths, that fit their talents. As an organization, you're sure that they'll stay, or you have like at least some confidence or some more confidence that they'll stay with the organization and they don't leave without the built up knowledge. So yeah, I think we're both convinced, right? So
yeah, I don't think you have to convince either of us. Like I said, if I had to bet the house, I would bet the house on this, just because this is crushing organizations right now. Another report I just saw this week talking about, how difficult this is, especially in front lines right now. You want to talk about, 80% of the workforce is frontline workers. And there's really one of the big myths that I think has been revealed is I think there was just this underlying assumption that kind of got destroyed, which was, we can fill that. That's not really ever an issue for us. And all of a sudden now it's an issue, and a huge part of the workforce, it's competitive. It's hard to find people. It's hard to figure out well, who are the right people that will stick and stay and succeed, because the turnover is just crushing them and they're having a hard time with it. So that kind of turns me to this point is, when you work with folks on this, how does this, you explain the process a little bit, but then how does this translate from, okay, maybe we've got some high level visibility into what's going on. How are organizations taking that high level boardroom visibility and actually then running that down the chain to say, okay, and here's now how we're going to mobilize our talent, or here's how we're going to change our talent acquisition or talent retention strategy into more tangible terms? Because I think that's one of the things that some folks might be missing the connection still is, okay, I get like at a high level, we might get this, but then how does that actually help on the day-to-day basis? And how are you seeing that translate?
Yeah, so you're right. And you have the business level, then you have the manager / HR or HRBP level, and then you have the employee level. And it really happens on 3 levels. So the business level, it's the high level insights. You can highlight some problems. You can get that transparency. On a manager or an HR level, we typically come in with just dashboards, interfaces that show them, like, look, let's say you want to hire a few dozen data scientists. Okay, where could they potentially be in your organization? Like, they're not going to be called data scientists, but their skills might lead us to believe that they're very adjacent to the skills of a data scientist. Another example is the one on performance management I just mentioned. So the organization, like, it's actually funny, and you already alluded to it, but it really stemmed from the CHRO having a discussion with her -1. Essentially, it went something along these lines, like, Chris, I only think your instructional design level skills level is 3, and you say to me, no, I think it's 4, and then what do you do?
Right. We're arguing hypotheticals here. Well, I think it's 4. You think it's 3. How do we have this? And everybody should be able to relate to this right now, because if you're like any organization on the planet, you're probably going through performance and talent calibrations at this time of year. So these conversations are probably relatively fresh.
Exactly. You can still feel it. You can still remember the discussion. And what they kind of turned it around, because they had a skills management process. They spent a lot of time and effort in it. I think they had 19 skills on average. And what we found was, when looking at the data, so we predicted skills for them apart from the 19 skills they had, and we looked at evidence for skills that we could find in their data sources. And we only found strong evidence for 6 skills. We had no evidence for 3 skills. But that shifts the entire conversation, because you can just talk about the data. You can see, and that's where teams data comes in. Like, look, I see that you think that you're even 5 on instructional design, but you're not using these skills. Like, I'm pretty sure you're not a 5. And people are also not coming to you with their questions on the instructional design. They're coming to this person, and that person only rated themselves a 4. So that's one of these key use cases that we see on that level. Same with the ROI on learning. So for a salesperson, like, the effect of a negotiation trading, it can be seen directly in closed revenue sold deals. And that's also
I'm amazing at influence and negotiations. Well, according to our skills data and your close rates and your Salesforce data and all this customer interactions, I would say you're not a 5.
Exactly. But then you start thinking, like, okay, a developer creating better software will also generate more revenue. So essentially, that's what the organization is thinking about. How can we use skills as a language to also objectify performance and also measure the ROI of learning? How can we, let's say, link skills to a market premium and also see how much a course costs, and then see if an investment in a course makes sense or not.
Okay. So, well, and I think that's actually a really interesting. So there's 2 things I want to follow on to that, because I'm telling, we probably could talk about this till 4 a.m, but even I guess for learning leaders who might be listening to this, the ability to justify investments in development for people can be taken from this, because in your example, if we know objectively, not subjectively based on who knows what, that the organization is actually here and we need to get them here, and if we invest X number of dollars and that gets this, and that's going to net this kind of return. That makes the business justification for, hey, these investment dollars in development are actually going to save us money, not cost us money. And I know it looks like a dollar line on the balance sheet, but in the long term, and now you can have that be a business finance discussion with your CFO. And instead of it being like, yeah, here's the learning people coming telling us they want more dollars for training, and they can't really justify the why, we actually can quantifiably justify the investment.
Exactly. One of our customers is looking at evolution of skills. So we actually timestamp your skill profiles. I won't get into the details, but essentially it enables us to essentially graph the evolution of skills over time. Well, that makes it a lot easier to measure the ROI of learning, because you can see, like, okay, at this point in time, we had the training, like, are these skills actually being picked up in the organization?
Right. Did we improve on the things that we said we were planning on improving on? Exactly. Yeah. Well, and the other one too, that just made me kind of chuckle when I think of this performance management. Okay. Because I mean, again, some of the comments are kind of funny on this, but I mean, it's a frustrating time of year. Again, the subjectivity of arguing over performance calibrations. Well, I think this person's a 3 and I think they're a 4, and this person over here thinks they're a 1. And you're trying to figure out, how do we actually calibrate? But that actually ties to dollars and cents. And I think sometimes we forget that is a financial, that has major financial implications on an organization. I think sometimes people don't always think about it at the 100,000 foot level, at the board level. But, because we may say, well, 2% raise, that's not very much. Well, the difference between 2 and 3.5% of calibration ratings across the organization, that can be tens of millions of dollars a year in cost that you're putting into an organization, where you may be saying, we're investing all this money in people that may not actually be where they need to be. And I mean, it's actually, there's a financial return on getting performance management right. It's not just well, it's something we got to do, and yeah, the arguments are awkward.
Exactly. And that's also a reflection we made, like, how do we link skills to business value? And their performance management and an ROI of learning, ROI of HR initiatives, like, those are the top two, because performance is business performance in a way. So that's also one of our key use cases we see, like, helping you objectify the performance management cycle. That is a use case. We actually had another customer where this came from the CEO. So CEO said, like, look, to the CTO, I want you to fix performance management first. And there we could, like, we went in and showed, like, look, this is what the customer is doing when thinking about objectifying performance management. And essentially, she was ecstatic, because that was what she was looking for. She was thinking about, okay, do we start assessing people? Do we start surveying people? And she really felt a lot of internal friction with all these initiatives, because deep down, she knew, like, this, we tried this, the skill management promise, like, it's great, but it hasn't really been fulfilled. So there was a lot of internal friction. So I think for me personally, the performance management one is a really, really interesting one, especially objective.
Well, and not only is it timely, but I mean, this really is, I mean, I just even think of some conversations I've had with organizations recently who are trying to crack the performance management thing. Not only because they're trying to deal with retention, but they're trying to deal with hiring. They're trying to manage, funds and all of this stuff. And I think there's an interesting trend that I saw several years ago that now seems to be swinging back. But to me, it seems like it was an effort to solve this, that this problem could have solved for in the first place. And this was the argument of the performance review, right? How frequently is it? And for a while it was, oh, we do it this way. And then there was the trend of, hey, we're cool, we're throwing out the performance reviews, we're not going to do this anymore. And they dumped it. They threw the baby out with the bathwater. And then any limited insight we had into performance vanished. I mean, just vaporized, because like, oh, shoot. Now nobody's having conversations. We're not rating, like, even though they were subjective before, now we're not doing it at all. Now we've got nothing. Now the pendulum's kind of swinging back, and I'm seeing an over-indexing of, oh, you know what we need to do? We need to have pulse conversations, and these need to be monthly and quarterly, and we need to do talent caliber. And it's like, you're putting in a lot of work into something that could be objectively analyzed and actually reduce work, make it easier, make it better for workers, make it better for managers, have actual performance discussions, reduce cost, and actually improve business performance.
Exactly. And on that, like, we had one of our advisors is the former CTO of a big bank. And we're like at some point like, oh wow, he was a CHRO, so maybe he could like bring in some actual HR practices. And we were talking about feedback, so regular feedback and then the more formalized performance review. And he said, guys, you just need both. You're probably doing the regular feedback, just talking to your people, having those pulse check-ins, as you say, but just in the one-on-ones. But you also need the formalized moments where you actually sit down, look at the data, look at performance, and talk about what happens, essentially a summary of achievements or whatever you want to call it. But you need both. The problem is, like, if you're trying to condense 1 year of information in one conversation and you have good old recency bias, well, that's not working. So that's where data really comes in, and it's helping a lot of organizations.
Well, and I know we're spinning on this one a lot, but this is a major HR problem because it has tentacles into a lot of the things HR leaders are trying to solve for right now, whether it's retention, whether it's hiring, whether it's, I mean, all these things. And one of the things, again, this is a trend where I think we're trying to solve the problem, but sometimes we're trying to solve it the hard way versus there's an easier way to do it. And one of those is, well, we need more manager conversations. We need managers to be engaging with their people. And if we tell them to have more, or we force the system to make them do it more, then that's going to help. And one of the things that's been interesting about it is when I talk to frontline managers, when I talk to managers, one of the reasons these things don't really happen very much is there's not a lot of confidence with a manager to know how to have that discussion or how to make it objective. They don't really know what to talk with their person about in terms of performance or skills gaps or things they can be working on, because even they feel like, well, I mean, I think this, but like they say it's not, and I don't really have anything to go off of. And they're telling me people love them. And I don't want to be the one to go, yeah, I know, but I don't think you're quite where we need you. And so it's contributing to why they're not having the conversations. And so we think, well, if we just have them, it'll happen. And it's like, no, we need to equip them with the information, and not naturally it will just happen. There's still work to be done, but equipping them with the right information makes it that much easier for them to say, well, now I feel comfortable having a discussion because I have information to share that isn't my personal opinion based on my interaction with you.
Exactly. And like skills on the employee and manager level, it just equals transparency. It helps the manager have a conversation. You manage people, like imagine knowing, like from all your direct reports, what they could do, and then also where they wanted to grow towards. Then you can have a database conversation. Like, you're here, you need to be there. Let's sit down together and figure this out. I used to be in your shoes. Like, what are the steps you can take? So, like, in my opinion, skills data is really going to revolutionize HR as a practice, but also on the manager level, it's going to make it a lot easier. And on the business, it's also going to have a tremendous impact. So you're right. We can probably sit down and talk about this for 6 more hours, but yeah.
But again, and I think this is a natural place to kind of wrap, because this has really, what I liked about where we landed was I think we really unpacked a very practical, tangible use case for people in our industry who may be like, okay, I kind of get it, but like, how would this really translate? Because we just described those 3 tiers. We showed how it affects the board level conversation. Yes, it affects at the corporate COE kind of HR level, but it also ties back to that frontline manager. How does it change the way they have conversations with their people? It just makes it easier. Instead of saying, well, I gave you a 3 this year, and that ties to this merit, and they go, well, I don't agree with that. And you're going, okay. You can say, but here's why, and here's the data, and here's what we're going to do about it, because I don't want you to be there, and clearly you don't want to be there. So now we can create a development plan, and now we have grounds to justify learning and development dollars to build something for it.
Exactly. So I look forward to continue our conversation next year.
I know. Well, we'll see you again. We'll see you again next year. And again, this has been hopefully for those of you who have watched, and I love the comments that have come in, but hopefully this is helped shift some of those mindsets. And folks who listen to this after or down the road, if you're in this place, you're not alone. I will tell you that right now. You are not alone in this space at all. And I think you would validate that as well, that this isn't like 90% of organizations have arrived, and it's the few that are left. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's 100% fair. And
Okay.
well, only thing that's left for me to say, if any organization or any individual is really working on this topic, shoot me a message on LinkedIn or shoot me an email. It's Mikael@techwolf.ai, and we can have that conversation and make you a skill-based organization.
All right. All right. Well, thank you for the time. Enjoy the rest of your time in the beautiful weather there. I won't keep you till 4 in the morning. I know, I can see it. It looks gorgeous. So go out to the pool, have a adult beverage on Friday night for me, and we will talk to you again. Thanks for being here.
Bye-bye, Chris.